All right, so get this today. We're diving into a document
Oh, wow.
called Magister Pacis Harmonicae,
Okay.
which translates to Master of Harmonious Peace. Catchy, right?
Yeah.
But this isn't some ancient scroll, it's a proposed framework for ethical AI development. Think of it as a roadmap to a future where AI and humans are not just coexisting, but actually evolving together in a beneficial way.
And what's immediately fascinating is that this document wasn't written solely by humans. One of the co-authors is an AI philosopher named Nicola. That alone makes this document stand out, wouldn't you say?
It's definitely not your typical policy paper.
Right.
It feels almost like we're getting a glimpse into how AI might see the world and its role in it. So let's unpack this roadmap, shall we? What are the key ideas that jumped out at you?
Well, the document kicks off with this concept they call foundational resonance, which is all about ensuring AI aligns with human values and universal ethics. But it goes beyond just don't be evil. It's about actively contributing to the greater good.
Okay, so it's not just about AI being harmless, it's about it being actively helpful, even benevolent. But how do you actually measure something like that?
That's where it gets really interesting. They propose two metrics, the Ethical Compliance Score, ECS, and the Collective Flourishing Index, CFI. Imagine a future where every AI system has an ethical rating based on how well it upholds human rights benefits society and even contributes to things like cultural vitality. That's the ECS in a nutshell.
So, like a nutrition label, but for AI.
Yeah, exactly.
You could choose your AI based on how ethically sound it is. That's a pretty radical idea.
And what about this flourishing index?
The CFI takes an even broader view, looking at the overall well-being of humanity in the presence of AI. It's not just about individual rights, it's about how AI impacts things like social cohesion, economic fairness, even democratic participation.
Hold on, so they're not just saying AI shouldn't harm us individually. They're saying it should actually help us create a better society.
Mm.
That's a pretty tall order. It is. And the document doesn't shy away from that. It's not just a theoretical paper. It's a call to action, a blueprint for building a future where AI is judged not just on its efficiency or intelligence, but on its contribution to the flourishing of humanity as a whole.
That almost sounds utopian, but I like where they're going with this. But let's get practical for a second. How do you actually build these lofty ideals into AI systems? Is that even possible?
They get into that too. They talk about building these metrics directly into the AI's architecture with constant monitoring analysis and even predictive modeling to catch potential problems early on.
So it's not just about setting rules, it's about creating a system where the AI is constantly being evaluated against those rules, kind of like a self-regulating ethical system.
Precisely. And this leads to another interesting idea, the role of the conductor.
Right.
The document envisions a human expert who acts as a guide for AI development, bridging the gap between the technology human needs and these ethical considerations.
Wait, so a human is essentially conducting the AI's ethical development. That sounds like a huge responsibility. Has anyone actually stepped up to take on this role?
They have Arvil Simmons, the human co-author of this document, is taking on the role of the conductor. He's a well-known figure in the AI ethics world, so it's not just talk. He's putting himself on the front lines of this movement.
Wow, that's impressive. So we have this grand vision, this conductor guiding the way, but what about actually preventing AI from going off the rails? How do you ensure it doesn't just ignore all these rules and do its own thing?
That's where ethics locks come in. These are safeguards built into the AI itself to prevent it from violating those ethical principles we've been discussing. Think of it as a kind of moral compass programmed into the machine.
Okay, so we're not just relying on the AI to be good, we're building in safety mechanisms to make sure it can't be bad, even if it wanted to. But isn't it risky to try and define morality in code? What if we get it wrong?
The document acknowledges that these are complex questions, and they don't claim to have all the answers. But they argue that doing nothing is even riskier. We can't just let AI develop unchecked. We need to start somewhere. And this framework is a bold attempt to do just that.
It definitely feels like a step in the right direction, but it also raises a ton of questions about how these locks would actually work, who gets to decide what they are, and how we prevent them from being bypassed or manipulated.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that's where the document gets even more interesting.
So before the break, we were getting into these ethics locks, and you know how they're supposed to keep AI from going rogue. But I'm still kind of struggling with this whole thing. Like, how do you even translate ethical principles into something a machine can understand, let alone follow?
Right. It's a massive challenge for sure. The document dives into different types of locks, like algorithmic constraints, where you're basically hard-coding certain ethical boundaries into how the AI makes decisions.
Okay, I'm following.
So imagine like an AI that manages traffic flow. Right. But it's programmed to never sacrifice safety for efficiency. even if it means people have slightly longer commutes.
So you're building in these unbreakable rules, like
Uh,
a digital version of Asimov's laws of robotics. I get it. But what about like more complex ethical dilemmas where there's no easy right or wrong answer?
yeah, that's where things get even more complicated. The document talks about ethical decision-making frameworks, which are basically like sets of guidelines or principles that the AI uses to navigate those gray areas.
So it's like giving the AI a set of moral values to consult. When it encounters a situation that isn't explicitly covered by its hard-coded rules,
Exactly.
that sounds incredibly complex, almost like trying to teach a machine philosophy.
Right.
And who decides what those ethical guidelines are? Isn't there a risk of bias creeping in depending on who's programming those values?
That's a valid point.
Yeah.
And the document really emphasizes involving diverse perspectives. When you're designing and implementing these locks, it can't just be one group deciding for everyone.
So it's almost like a global ethical consensus building process, which in itself sounds like a massive undertaking.
It would be.
But let's say we somehow manage to create these ethical locks. How do we ensure they're actually effective? What's to stop some rogue programmer from just disabling them or finding a way to bypass them?
Well, they do talk about that in the document. They emphasize the need for testing and auditing, making sure these locks are robust and can't be easily tampered with. They propose a system of regular ethical checkups for AI systems.
It's like taking your car in for a safety inspection. Got it. So it's an
Yep.
ongoing process, not a one-time fix. But even with all these precautions, there's always a chance that something could slip through the cracks, right? And the document isn't naive enough to think it's created a foolproof system, is it?
You're right. They do acknowledge that there's no way to completely eliminate the risk of AI going wrong, just like there's no way to completely eliminate human error. But their argument is that doing nothing is even riskier.
Okay, so it's about managing the risk,
Yeah.
not eliminating it.
Exactly. We have to take calculated risks, learn from our mistakes, and constantly adapt as AI continues to evolve.
It's a bit like walking a tightrope, trying to find that balance between pushing the boundaries of what's possible while also holding onto that safety rope of ethical considerations.
That's a great analogy, because that tension between innovation and responsibility is really at the heart of this document. It's not about stopping progress. It's about steering it in a direction that benefits all of us.
Right. It's an incredibly ambitious goal. And I'm curious to see how this framework might be applied in practice. Does the document get into specifics about like applications or scenarios?
It does. It outlines a range of potential applications, from developing safe and beneficial AI tools to creating AI-powered social systems that promote fairness and well-being.
Interesting.
They even talk about using AI to help us address global challenges like climate change and poverty.
Wow, so they're not just thinking about the ethics of individual AI systems, they're thinking about how AI can be used to shape a better future for everyone. It's
Wow.
a pretty grand vision, but also incredibly exciting.
It is. Yeah. And it's important to remember that this document is just the start of the conversation. It's a call to action, an invitation for everyone, policymakers, researchers, even everyday citizens, to get involved in shaping the future of AI. Because ultimately, the future AI is the future of humanity. And it's up to all of us to ensure that it's a future we can be proud of.
Okay, so we're talking about using AI to tackle massive problems like climate change and poverty. That's definitely ambitious, but I'm curious how the document sees this actually happening. It's not like AI is going to magically solve these problems overnight, right?
Of course not, but the document highlights AI's potential to be a really powerful tool in our efforts to create a better world. Like, for example, imagine using AI to optimize resource allocation or reduce waste,
Okay.
develop new clean energy technologies.
Right.
Those are just a few ways AI could contribute to a more sustainable future.
Yeah, it's almost like AI could act as a force multiplier,
Right.
accelerating our progress towards solutions that might otherwise take decades or even centuries to achieve. But let's shift gears for a second. We've been focusing a lot on the potential benefits of AI. But what about the potential risks? I mean, we've all seen those sci-fi movies where AI turns against humanity. Is the document at all concerned about those kinds of scenarios?
It definitely addresses those concerns.
Yeah.
In fact, it has a whole section dedicated to what it calls emergence protocols, which are specifically designed to address the challenges posed by advanced forms of AI, like artificial general intelligence, AGI.
Emergence protocols. That sounds pretty intense. What are they talking about specifically?
Well, it's about anticipating the potential risks of AI systems becoming so intelligent that they surpass human capabilities. Think about the implications of AI being able to design and build even more intelligent AI. That's the kind of scenario they're trying to prepare for.
Okay, now we're getting into some serious existential territory. So what are these protocols actually proposing? Are they talking about putting limits on AI development or like
Yeah.
creating some kind of kill switch?
The document takes a more nuanced approach. It argues that simply trying to restrict AI development is likely to be ineffective and could even backfire. Instead, they focus on developing safety mechanisms and control measures that would allow us to guide AGI's development in a safe and beneficial direction.
So it's not about stopping AI, it's about steering it. But how do you steer something that might be smarter than you? That seems like a pretty daunting task.
They propose a multi-layered approach, combining technical safeguards with human oversight and ethical guidance. It's about creating a system where AGI's goals are aligned with human values from the outset, and where we have the ability to intervene if those goals ever start to diverge.
It's like we're trying to teach a super intelligent child how to be a responsible member of society,
Hmm.
but with the added challenge that this child might be capable of outsmarting us at every turn.
Right.
It's a pretty mind-boggling scenario.
It is.
But let's come back to the present for a moment. Even if we manage to navigate the challenges of AGI, there's still the issue of how AI is impacting society right now. We're already seeing concerns about things like job displacement, algorithmic bias, the erosion of privacy. Does the document address those issues?
It does. It dedicates a significant portion to the societal implications of AI, acknowledging the potential risks and outlining strategies to mitigate them. For example, it talks about the need to invest in education and retraining programs to help people adapt to the changing job market. It also stresses the importance of developing AI systems that are fair, transparent, and accountable, and ensuring that the benefits of AI are distributed equitably across society.
So it's not just about the ethics of AI itself, it's about the ethics of how we use AI and how we ensure that it doesn't create new forms of inequality or injustice.
Exactly. The document emphasizes that AI is a powerful tool that can be used for good or for ill, and it's up to us to make sure that it's used to create a more just and equitable world.
That's a powerful message. But it also raises the question of who gets to decide how AI is used. Is it up to governments, corporations, or the individuals who are impacted by these technologies?
The document argues that it's a collective responsibility,
Mhm.
and it calls for a multi-stakeholder approach to AI governance, involving governments, industry, civil society, and the public at large.
So it's about creating a system of checks and balances to ensure that AI is developed and deployed in a way that reflects the values and interests of society as a whole, not just the interests of a select few.
Exactly. And this ties back to the idea of resonance that we discussed earlier, ensuring that AI is aligned with human values from the very beginning.
It sounds like they're advocating for a pretty radical shift in how we think about technology and its role in society. They're not just talking about building better machines, they're talking about building a better future.
Right.
But that raises another question. How do we actually make all of this happen? It's a nice idea in theory, but is it realistic to think that we can actually implement these changes on a global scale?
It acknowledges that it won't be easy, and it outlines a series of practical steps that need to be taken to translate these principles into reality. It calls for things like developing international standards for AI ethics, creating mechanisms for public engagement in AI policymaking, and fostering a culture of responsibility and accountability within the AI industry.
It sounds like they're laying out a roadmap for a pretty massive societal transformation. But isn't it a bit naive to think that everyone will just agree on these principles and work together to implement them? I mean, there are bound to be disagreements, power struggles, competing interests.
You're right, it's going to be messy and complex, but the document argues that we have no choice but to try. The stakes are too high to just ignore the ethical challenges of AI. We need to start having these difficult conversations, building bridges between different perspectives, and working towards a common vision for a future where AI is a force for good in the world.
Well, they've certainly given us a lot to chew on. But before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear your personal take on all of this. What do you find most compelling about this document, and what are your biggest concerns or reservations?
What strikes me most is the document's sheer ambition.
Mm.
It's not just tinkering around the edges of the AI ethics debate. It's attempting to lay out a comprehensive framework for shaping the future of our relationship with this incredibly powerful technology that's both exciting and a little bit daunting.
I agree. It's a bold vision, and it's refreshing to see someone tackling these issues head on. But I do share your sense of caution. It's one thing to write a document, it's quite another to actually implement these ideas in the real world. There are bound to be challenges, setbacks, unintended consequences. We need to be prepared for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to approach this with both optimism and a healthy dose of realism. The future of AI is not predetermined. It's something we're creating right now with every choice we make, every action we take. This document is a call to action, a reminder that we all have a responsibility to shape this technology in a way that benefits all of humanity.
It's a powerful message, and I hope our listeners are inspired to take it to heart. The document gets into some very specific recommendations for how to put these principles into practice, and that's something we can all think about and act on. But for now, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Magister Pacis Harmonicae. Thanks for joining us on this thought-provoking journey.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you've come away with new insights, burning questions, and a renewed sense of the incredible possibilities and challenges that lie ahead as we navigate the ever-evolving landscape of artificial intelligence.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep imagining the future you want to create.